All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is the last panel on the innovation stage for today. I hope you're as excited as I am for this next topic. If you are as excited as I am, you would actually come to the stage and put your headphones on so that you can listen to this amazing speaker that is going to be talking to us about many very interesting topics, such as decentralized storage and the likes. Is there anyone that wants to come into the stage? You can do so. Put your headphones on so you'll be able to hear the speaker, Navjit, being able to speak now. All right, okay, this is the last keynote discussion of the day on this stage. At 7 p.m., you'll be able to find your coaches just outside to be able to get to the gala dinner. And on that note, I think, Navjit, I will leave the stage to you to be able to speak about all these great things that you have to say. Let's welcome him onto the stage and give him a great round of applause. Thank you.
Hi guys, my name is Navjit Dhaliwal. I'm the CEO of Iagon. Before I get into the whole presentation, about innovation in decentralized storage and data compliance, I want to talk about how we got to where we are today and how the story started about Iagon. So I'm actually from the healthcare industry myself. So I worked in the healthcare industry for a long time. And a lot of things that we deal with is private, sensitive data. So every day we try to basically manage this according to regulations that the government usually sets out. And so I read the Satoshi paper in 2013, and the one thing I tried to do was secure medical data using blockchain technology. But it was very early at that time, and I didn't really get into it, and I didn't have the expertise myself, because I'm an entrepreneur at heart and a healthcare professional. So I didn't get back to this idea until early 2017. That's why I met the co-founders that are today, Dr. Rohit Gupta, who's with us today, and Dr. Claudio Lima, and Dr. Ladd Harrison, which are the co-founders of Iagon. And the idea expanded much more than securing medical files. It expanded into a much more secure, compliant, decentralized cloud service. And when we hear compliance, that's a scary word, especially for the Web3 industry, right? But we want to differentiate compliance in the financial spectrum with data compliance. Data compliance is very clear-cut regulations, clear-cut guidelines on how it should be structured and how you should be implementing data compliance. And financial compliance, when we're talking about financial, it's no clear guidelines, and it's hard to implement something in Web3 space because you don't know what the compliance regulations are. So, and also financial compliance is more about controlling people. It's more about controlling your funds, controlling how much you spend, where you spend it, and they could put a pause on your transactions or your account at any second, right? Censorship. Whereas data compliance is there to protect the individuals about their private data, secure data. So they want, and that's why one of the reasons why GDPR in Europe was implemented was to protect the EU citizens from mismanagement of data, especially when it's shared to third parties, by big companies, sold to different companies. So data compliance is there to protect the individual rather than go against them. And that's what we're talking about today, and how we innovate and how we make it very simple, in a simple way, to comply with these regulations using decentralized storage. So first, before we get into compliance in general, we have to understand data in how big the field is. It's so vast, and it's growing rapidly. It's going to expand exponentially over the next years. And every industry, every tech industry that we're looking at needs some sort of data, some sort of compute. And that's why we have to focus on this in Web3 industry, even though we don't. Right now, we're building Web3. But why are we calling it Web3? what makes Web3 Web3? It's the decentralization, right? So if we're building on Web2 infrastructure, we can't call it Web3. And that's what most, if not all, almost all projects are building on Web2. So it's important to understand that when we're talking about data and data storage, that when we're talking about data and computing, that it's important to decentralize this aspect as well, because this layer is very important. So, rapid rise, steep challenges, escalating costs in terms of data breaches, global expansion in frameworks, and ever-changing frameworks, because they're changing all the time. So, and also surge in fines in terms of non-compliance by different companies. So let's go to the first one, data breaches. So it's very common to have data breaches almost every week. We see the data breaches every week, and it's becoming a natural thing that, okay, oh, there's another data breach, oh, there's another data breach. But why don't we act on that? We're not doing anything about it. We're just saying, okay, but this data that's being leaked, it's very sensitive information, sometimes healthcare records, sometimes insurance, sometimes personal information. A lot of sensitive information is being leaked. And we want to basically make it more secure, more compliant with the security regulations as well. And that's what IAGON's focusing on, decentralize that data, not having it in one server at one place at a specific time. Global regulations and frameworks. When we think about building an infrastructure like this, it needs to be flexible. It can't be robust. Why? Because frameworks are changing all the time. Legal frameworks, and there might be a new regulation that comes out of a new country. So when you're building any kind of platform, especially when it's a core infrastructure play, it has to be flexible in a sense that it can comply to new regulations and not to make it obsolete if it's robust. We'll talk about also, in terms of fines, in terms of non-compliance, we'll talk about that a bit later, but a lot of the Web2 companies, especially in the cloud infrastructure, they are actually, it's cheaper for them to pay the fines than build backwards, and we'll talk about why later. Going back to the previous slide, we talked about how it's important to protect your privacy, your sensitive information. We talk about data breaches, and we talk about how people are okay with data breaches, but when you ask them personally, a lot of people want their data secure, private, and confidential, right? It's a very, and most of you out here would agree with me, I think, when saying you don't want your personal information out there in the public. But we have to take a stronger step in terms of adhering to that and making companies, let's say, focus on that privacy and sensitive information, protecting it and making it private. And we talked about also previously on the previous slides in terms of big companies not building backwards. You can see by these big numbers, right? You can see who's not adhering to privacy compliance. These guys are taking data and using it for their own use, or own purposes, own benefits. And they're actually, in a way, in a sense, it's actually easier for them to pay the small fines relatively to the money that they make, rather than building a model that works against their current business model. If they were to construct something like a decentralized cloud service, they have the expertise to do it for sure, but they wouldn't build that type of system because they would completely destroy their revenue model, because they make a lot of money, and obviously they don't want to cut into that, right? Now from the other side, we looked at the infrastructure in terms of the Web2 infrastructure, Google, Amazon, all these. But then you look at it from the other side, right? If these guys, if the infrastructure guys aren't adhering to compliance, how is enterprises going to be compliant? Businesses that on a daily basis want to be compliant, that's why they do all these costs, legal, auditing costs, on average 5.47 million a year. So how are they supposed to be compliant with data storage if the infrastructure actually cannot be compliant, right? And that's the big deal. Even though they spend this money to be compliant, it's hard for them to be compliant. And even we've talked to many legal advisors, different big companies like Ernst & Young, they don't have a clear answer. They don't understand because the infrastructure is not there, right? If the infrastructure is not compliant, then it's hard for a business to be compliant. So how do we solve this? And that's what Iagon's working on, compliance in a box, one-click compliance. And that sounds like a magical word, like how do you make one-click compliance, right? It's if you could do it, that would be great. But that's what we were working on. And how do we do that? We do it through different technologies. And I could go into depth in terms of the dev and the architecture, but without boring you, let's focus on the general premises. So we have breacher-proof for your data files with our secure lake patented technology. One decision we take, even though it's Web3, as small companies, you're competing against a lot of giants in the space, and sometimes it depends on the funding you get, not specifically how innovative your idea is. So in 2018, we filed for a patent on the technology. Secure lake technology, basically what we do is we learn the behavior of each resource provider. I'll go into the secure lake later, but in general, we learn the behavior of the resource providers in different variables, including performance, availability, trustability, location, and that's just some of the variables that you can take into account. And why is the last one important? Location. Location is important for constricting data in a specific region. So if you want to be GDPR compliant, we're only allocating the shards of the data specifically to EU resource providers. If you want to be compliant with a different framework, it only in that specific region. And you can even allocate it to specific vendors, matching tailored basically to the user's fit. So performance, availability, whatever you want. If it's archival data, you might not need availability all the time. But that's why you're able to reduce and increase your cost depending on your use case. So Iagon Secure Lake patented technology. What is the Secure Lake part? So Secure Lake, think about current Web2 infrastructure. It's kind of a server database where you have one specific file or multiple copies of that specific file in different locations on a specific server at a specific time. And that's why you have these data leaks. So if you have an infiltration of that database, and it's usually, we can't say Google isn't secure or AWS isn't secure, but the implementation of it is where the errors lie. And if you breach that first encryption, you leak all the data in that server, the whole file, right? And that's a problem. That's a problem we faced today. So that's where Web3 comes in, and that's why a lot of these other platforms have done it this way, is sharding and spreading across to different resource providers. So having small mini lakes that are completely frozen, so even if you encrypt or decrypt the encryption, there's no way to make sense of that information because it's just one piece of the file that has no meaning until all the shards are combined, which only the user has access to, which means that the user has the only access to the data. There's no other way of doing that. We're storing the hash, the fingerprint of that specific file on blockchain. That's the access layer. And then we have the random data allocation for the network seamless compliance, which means that we have randomly, so we're not randomly, but in an intelligent way. So how we differentiate from, for example, IPFS, which is the most important kind of, or most well-known player in the space. So IPFS, why it cannot be compliant with data regulations is, first of all, you can't delete private data. That's important for GDPR regulation. If you have a private person and you want to delete your private records, you have to, by law, as a resource provider, delete that data. IPFS cannot guarantee that. Also, the performance factor of IPFS in terms of efficiency and performance is not there compared to Web2 solutions. And when you have this compliance and performance factor, you have a hard, let's say, not a hard, but maybe a big gap between bridging Web 2 and Web 3. And that's where we hope to solve it. So we talked about privacy, security, sovereignty, which is also part of IAGON's plan. Operational sovereignty, you have full control of your data. But we also can reduce costs by this, because you can reduce costs by up to 80%. Currently in a testnet, we've determined that we can lower the cost up to $2.11 per terabyte. That's really, I think, a great price for such a solution. Earning a reward, so we take the idle capacities from storage providers, compute, and we reward them with IAGON tokens. All this by decreasing the footprint because we're using idle capacities. And earlier, again, I talked about the expansive network in terms of how many industries that data and compute affect. It's such a large, vast amount. Think about every kind of game-changing industry in the world. You need data, you need compute. And big data, you have IoT, you have so many vast, and Web3 as well, and Web3 is expanding exponentially. So data is probably the digital gold, if you ask me, because it's a commodity that's limited to the amount of machines we have, and it's growing at a rapid pace. So this is the compliance battle that we're looking at, like making it simple for Web 2 customers to onboard. We're talking to 4 large enterprises already on organically reaching out to us because they're very interested in the one-click compliance. I've heard so many speeches out here talking about data and compliance being one issue, and it's a generic issue that everyone faces. So we think that we can solve this by one-click compliance. There's no middleman. You control your data. Sovereignty, you have full control as a person or as an enterprise. So operational sovereignty is a big thing for us. We'll be also building dApps on top of the infrastructure. We think that that's going to drive the adoption because data itself, maybe it's a bit boring. Not everyone will get it. But building dApps on top of the infrastructure that we think is compliant, like, for example, Ledgerfold that we will be presenting on mainnet soon. So we'll showcase that at the end. That's a surprise for you guys. And building like dApps, like multimedia dApps, like mail, encrypted messaging, docs, Stature, which is a reputation protocol. So different dApps that would create use cases, not just for Web 2, but Web 3 clients. And we want to have a seamless integrated for Web 2 clients. Because the first kind of thing that they face in Web 2 is the wallet. And that's a step, I think, too far for Web 2 clients sometimes. So you want to come in the middle ground, meet them with a Web 2 login, maybe. But integrate the beauty of Web 3, which is the decentralization, the security, the privacy. And with the decentralized model, we can actually make it compliant as well. We have 4 founders. I talked about them earlier. I'll just give a background on what their background is. Myself, I'm more from an entrepreneurial background. I have 2 successful ventures, one more earning over 10 million NOK, which is about $1 million USD a year. I've been fortunate enough to fund the project partially myself. I have Dr. Rohit Gupta with me as well today. He's the former director of technology for Expedia. He's currently one of the senior managers at Google. Of course, we can't afford his salary full time, but he's helping us out where he can. Dr. Claudio Lima, he's a former CTO of Huawei in East Asia. And then we have Dr. Alad Harrison, who's an economics professor, a machine learning expert. We have a little bit over 20, that's the old number, but we have a little bit over 20 people on our team, mostly developers. We don't want to market right away because we need a product first, and that's what we're driving at. And we're going to show you a piece of the product that we built today, which is Ledgerflow, which manages transactions, accounting for Web3 projects. All right. on mainnet, by the way, guys. So we're just waiting for audits to clear. Six minutes long, but we're trying to show all the functionalities as much as we can and fast. We didn't have so much time to prepare the video, but hope you guys like it. You can sell multiple assets. It doesn't need to be one specific asset. You can sell ADA or another asset or bulk transfers. Making it simple as possible for the Web3 customers as well, because it needs to be a short learning curve for any projects. Creating a multi-sig, as many users as you want. All the invoices will be stored on the decentralized cloud network of Iagon. Sending tokens to your multi-sig made easy. This is going to be the first multi-sig made easy on Cardano. So this is actually ready, just to emphasize that. This is ready live on mainnet, but we haven't launched because audits. Both authorized by both multi-sig users, and then it's processing. Both users are approved, and now you can complete the transaction. It's details on network, on testnet, and mainnet. You can manage your transactions with ease. Put labels, amounts, if you want to, organize whoever you want to send to. These are the kind of dApps that we want on building on top of the infrastructure, which will create multiple use cases, not just about the storage and cloud. Think about Google and how they did their different dApps and how they created Gmail, Google Drive, different apps that people use, that drive the adoption, unknowingly using the storage or compute. Might be quick for some, so try to take in the managing your multi-sig settings easily through settings. I mean, it might be really quick for some, but we're trying to put as much information as possible in a short video, 6-minute video. You can edit the number of owners on the multi-sig, add owners, remove owners. Switch between multi-sigs, create multiple multi-sigs. Easy way to manage all your transactions for Web3 projects. You can cut it off if you want. I think that's enough. So I'm not going to bore you guys through the whole preview, but we'll post it on Twitter as well, so you guys can check it out. At the end, your data, your control, your future. You control your data. That's the main goal of Iagon, and not just for private data, but for enterprise. Thank you, guys.